I have to be honest with you, just looking at the news cycle this week, there is still this really palpable void in the music world.
Oh, absolutely.
We are coming up on 7 months since John Michael Osbourne passed away, back on July 22nd of last year. And the tributes just haven't stopped coming.
They really haven't. And I think that speaks to just how confusing and massive his footprint actually was. We're talking about a guy who, by all accounts, shouldn't have made it out of the 1970s alive.
Right.
Let alone make it to July 2025.
Exactly. And that is the central mystery we are looking at today, because we have a massive stack of sources here. We've got biographies, we have court transcripts from the 80s, tour writers, and medical reports from his final years.
It's a lot of material.
It is. And the mission for this deep dive is to answer a very specific question for you. How did a factory worker from Aston, Birmingham, a kid who openly admitted he couldn't read music, struggled with dyslexia, how did he manage to define heavy metal not once, but twice?
And managed to become the most famous reality TV star on the planet in the process.
Yeah.
Because it is a story of extreme contradictions. You have the Prince of Darkness on one hand, and then the shuffling, confused dad from MTV on the other.
But before we get to the TV star or even the solo icon, we really have to go back to the moment where it all should have ended.
1979.
Yes. April 27th, 1979. Because according to the band histories we have here, this wasn't just a breakup. This was an eviction.
It was brutal. Black Sabbath fired him. And you have to understand the context here. Black Sabbath was a band entirely fueled by substances at that point.
Right. They were the kings of excess.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were the kings. But Ozzy's consumption had reached a level where even they couldn't function around him. He was erratic. He was unreliable. So they just cut him loose.
That is a special kind of achievement, isn't it? Being too wild for Black Sabbath in the 70s.
Yeah, it really is.
And the sources paint a really dark picture of that immediate aftermath. This wasn't Ozzy saying, fine, I'll go solo and show them.
Not at all. He went to the Le Parc Hotel in West Hollywood and essentially just locked the door.
Yeah.
He spent 3 months inside, and the numbers in the biography are staggering. He blew through 96,000 pounds in 3 months.
96,000.
Yeah. And that is 1979 money, so adjust that for inflation, and you're talking about a fortune.
Just on booze and drugs.
Booze and cocaine in industrial quantities. He was convinced he was going back to Birmingham to live on the dole. He thought his life was totally over at 30 years old.
Which brings us to the plot twist. Because the daughter of the man who actually managed Black Sabbath walks into that hotel room.
Sharon Arden. Sharon is the pivotal figure here. Later, Sharon Osbourne, of course. But she walks into this dark, terrible-smelling room, picks him up and says, "I will manage you."
Wow.
But it wasn't just about cleaning him up. She had a vision for a completely new band. And this is the detail I love from the notes. The band was actually supposed to be called Blizzard of Oz.
Wait, really? I always thought that was just the album title.
A lot of people do.
Right.
But you're right. It was supposed to be the group name.
Like Led Zeppelin or Deep Purple?
Exactly. That was the intention. It was meant to be a democratic group effort.
Yeah.
But if you look at the album cover for that first record, the record company pulled a fast one.
What'd he do?
They printed Ozzy Osbourne in this massive Gothic font, and then Blizzard of Oz in tiny letters at the very bottom.
Oh, wow.
So they accidentally launched the solo brand. And Ozzy was actually terrified because he didn't want to be a solo star. He wanted a gang around him.
Well, he was also terrified of the competition, wasn't he? Because Black Sabbath didn't just fade away after they fired him. They hired Ronnie James Dio.
Yes. And that is key to his whole motivation. So Ozzy heard that album and felt completely cornered.
Yeah, the sources say he told friends, if I don't match that, I'm dead.
That pressure is what forced him to find a sound that was completely different from Sabbath.
And to get that sound, he needed a partner, which really starts the era of the revolving door of guitarists. Because I feel like Ozzy's solo career is basically a masterclass in talent scouting. And the first recruit is arguably the holy grail of metal guitar, Randy Rhoads.
It's almost impossible to overstate Randy's impact.
Yeah.
You have to remember, Ozzy came from Sabbath, which was slow, sludgy, doom-laden riffs.
The Tony Iommi and the Devil's Interval. Right.
Exactly, the tritone. But Randy Rhoads was totally different. He was a tiny guy from a band called Quiet Riot who actually taught classical guitar by day.
That's the wild part to me.
Yeah, and he didn't even like Black Sabbath.
He wasn't a fan at all. So what did he bring to the table that was so completely different?
He brought a neoclassical discipline to the chaos. When we say neoclassical in metal, we mean using scales derived from classical music like the harmonic minor scale, rather than the blues pentatonic scales that everyone else was using.
Like Paige and Naomi.
Right. If you listen to Crazy Train or Mr. Crowley, those aren't blues riffs. They are constructed like classical violin pieces, just played on a Marshall stack at maximum volume. It gave Ozzy a sharper, faster, much more 80s sound.
And they wrote those hits in a frighteningly short amount of time, didn't they? It seemed like they just shared a brain.
They really did.
But we can't talk about Randy without talking about how it ended.
Yeah.
March 19th, 1982, Leesburg, Florida.
This is the tragedy that haunts the entire Ozzy story, because it was just so senseless. They were on a tour bus driving to Orlando. The bus had an AC malfunction, so they pulled over at a property to fix it. And it just happened to have an airstrip.
Right, and the bus driver, Andrew Aycock.
He was also a pilot, but his license had actually expired.
And this guy decides to steal a plane while everyone on the bus is sleeping or groggy.
Yeah. It was a Beechcraft F-35. He takes it for a joyride. He does one flight with the keyboardist, Don Airey, and he buzzes the bus to wake up the drummer, Tommy Aldridge.
Which is incredibly dangerous.
Insanely dangerous. But they land safely, and then he goes up again. This time he takes the makeup artist, Rachel Youngblood, and Randy.
And Randy was afraid of flying, right? Why did he even get on the plane?
He was terrified of it. The common story in the sources is that he only got on because he wanted to take some aerial photos of the countryside for his mother. He wasn't looking for a thrill at all. He was just being a dutiful son. But Aycock, the pilot, decided to buzz the bus again. He was trying to be funny.
And Ozzy is asleep on the bus while this is happening?
He is. He's sleeping. On the third pass, the wing of the plane clipped the top of the tour bus. The plane spiraled, severed a pine tree, and crashed directly into the garage of a nearby mansion.
And it exploded.
Exploded on impact. Randy, Rachel, and the pilot died instantly.
It's just, I mean, Randy was 25 years old.
25.
He was on the verge of becoming the biggest guitarist in the world. And it's over because of a prank.
The silence afterwards is what the survivors always talk about in the interviews. The bus stopped rocking from the impact, and there was just this fire and total silence.
That is horrifying.
Ozzy completely fell apart. I mean, he unraveled. He lost his musical soulmate. But this is where we see the Sharon factor again, because she had him back on stage 2 weeks later.
2 weeks? That sounds inhuman.
It does. But she knew that if he stopped, the grief and the drugs would absolutely kill him. He had to keep moving.
Wow.
But now he had the impossible task of replacing a ghost.
Right. Which brings us to the unsung hero of the Ozzy saga. Because I want to talk about Jakey Lee. I feel like in the history books, he always gets skipped over between Randy and Zach.
He really does.
But he wrote Bark at the Moon.
Jakey Lee had the hardest job in rock and roll history. He walked into a room where everyone was actively grieving Randy Rhoads.
And there's that famous story about his audition, right?
Yeah, with George Lynch. So George Lynch, from the band Dokken, was also auditioning. And Lynch thought he had the gig. He was literally sitting there waiting for it to be official.
Okay.
Ozzy walks in, looks at Jakey Lee, points at him, and tells Lynch, "It's gone. You've lost it." He's the guy.
That is stone cold. He did that just based on the look.
Based on the look and the playing style.
Yeah.
Jake brought a sharper, more aggressive rhythmic sound to the band. He played on Bark at the Moon and The Ultimate Sin. But the business side of this...
This is where the deep dive gets really ugly.
Yeah.
Because we have the contract details here for the Bark at the Moon album.
Yeah.
And this is the whole work for hire controversy, right? This always makes my blood boil when I read about it.
It should make you mad. Jakey Lee wrote the music for that title track.
Yeah.
That is an iconic, legendary metal riff. But when it came time to sign the contract, he was promised $5,000 plus writing credits.
Which is standard.
Right. But instead, he was presented with a document that gave him 0 writing credits. No royalties. Just a flat fee and a cash bribe, about $10,000 extra to keep his mouth shut.
And he signed it. Why would anyone sign away their rights like that?
He felt he had absolutely no choice. He was young, he was replacing a legend, and if he walked away right then, he'd be back to nothing.
God.
But in today's money, if you look at the streaming numbers and sales for Bark at the Moon, he likely lost out on over $635,000.
Just on that one song?
Just for the title track.
Yeah.
Not to mention the legacy of not having your actual name on your own work.
And the way he was fired later was straight out of a mob movie.
It really was. This is 1987.
Yeah.
Sharon takes him out to dinner.
Just a friendly catch-up, he thinks.
Right. They're eating, chatting, and she starts saying things like, "You know, Jake, someday when you have your own band..."
Oh, wow. Dropping hints.
And he didn't click. He just thought she was being supportive. He went home, and his roommate said, "Hey, man, I heard you got fired."
The news hit the street before it hit him.
Exactly. When he called Sharon and asked, "Am I fired?" she just said, "Yes, that's why I took you out to dinner."
That is ruthless efficiency.
Very ruthless.
But again, looking at it from a management perspective, it cleared the decks for the next evolution. And this is the guy most modern fans probably associate with Ozzy.
The Viking? Zakk Wylde.
Yeah.
Zakk joins in 1987 for the No Rest for the Wicked album. And the dynamic shifts completely here.
How so?
Well, Randy was the soulmate. Jake was treated like the employee. But Zakk was family.
Okay.
He looked at Ozzy almost like a father figure, or at least a big brother. He revered Sabbath. He always said Lord Iommi is in his DNA.
And musically, he brought the squeal, right? I always hear guitarists talk about Zakk Wylde's squeal.
Yeah, that's the pinch harmonic.
What exactly is that?
It's a guitar technique where you catch the string with the flesh of your thumb at the exact same time as you pick it. It creates this really high-pitched scream or squeal.
And Zakk put that on everything.
Everything. It gave Ozzy this huge, heavy, southern fried metal sound that allowed him to actually survive the 90s.
That's a really good point, because the 90s killed 80s metal. Grunge came in and just wiped out bands like Motley Crue and Poison overnight.
It did, but Ozzy survived. And Zakk was a massive part of that. They won Grammys together for Love and Loud. They had a huge hit with No More Tears.
And the story of that song in the notes is great. It just started as a jam session, right?
Totally spontaneous. Zakk played that iconic slide bass riff, and Ozzy just started singing the melody over it. The call and response vocals weren't overthought. They just flowed.
Their relationship seems the most genuine when you read through these sources. There are all these stories of Ozzy poking Zakk in the eye just to annoy him.
Yeah. Or demanding that Zakk go make him a sandwich in the middle of a rehearsal.
Just totally comfortable with each other.
It was a true brotherhood. Zakk kept Ozzy credible when the entire music industry was changing. But honestly, even Zakk couldn't predict the next pivot.
Right. The pivot that changed pop culture forever.
Yeah.
We're talking about the year 2002, the Osbournes. I remember watching the premiere of this.
It is so hard to explain to people who weren't there just how weird this was at the time. In 2002, reality TV was Survivor or, game shows. Nobody had ever put cameras in a celebrity's house to just watch them live their daily life.
And the contrast was the entire hook of the show. You have the Prince of Darkness, the guy who famously bit the head off a bat in Des Moines, and he's struggling to put a plastic liner in a kitchen trash can.
Exactly. Dealing with the pets going to the bathroom on the rug. It completely deconstructed the myth.
There's that famous moment where he's at a concert rehearsal and someone turns on a bubble machine.
Oh, that's the best quote. Ozzy looks at Sharon and screams, "Come on, Sharon, I'm the Prince of fucking Darkness."
He knew it was absurd.
He was totally in on the joke. And it became MTV's most watched show ever.
But the show also revealed the damage, didn't it? We saw the tremors, we saw the hearing loss, and the sources remind us that the Prince of Darkness label wasn't always just a funny marketing gimmick. There was real darkness there.
Absolutely. We have the files on the Suicide Solution lawsuit from the 80s here.
Right.
Parents actually sued Ozzy, claiming his lyrics caused their son to commit suicide. Now, the case was dismissed on freedom of speech grounds, which set a huge legal precedent, but that weighed incredibly heavily on him.
I can imagine.
He was deeply affected by the accusation that his music killed kids. And we really can't ignore the domestic violence either.
The 1989 incident.
Yes, where he attempted to strangle Sharon while he was completely intoxicated. He woke up in jail and genuinely didn't know why he was there.
It is a miracle they stayed together after that.
It took intense rehab and a lot of work, but they did. They stayed a solid unit until the very end.
Which brings us to the final chapter. The last 5 or 6 years of his life. Looking at these medical reports, it seems like 2019 was the real turning point where the wheels just started to come off.
It was a terrible domino effect. He had a fall at his home in the middle of the night, and that fall dislodged metal rods in his body. They had been put there after an ATV accident way back in 2003.
Oh, man. So a fall undoes a 16-year-old surgery.
Yeah, and that led to new spinal surgery, which led to severe nerve damage. And then, amidst all that physical pain, he publicly reveals the Parkinson's diagnosis in 2020.
He described those years as an absolute nightmare. He was in constant nerve pain, struggling with balance issues.
But the one thing that didn't fail, the one thing that stayed strong, was the voice.
That's the Ozzy resilience right there. He could barely walk, but if you put a microphone in front of him, the tone was still there.
And he was determined to do one last thing. He really didn't want to fade away in a hospital bed.
Which leads to July 5th, 2025, Villa Park.
Birmingham.
Back to the beginning.
That's what they called the show. It was in his hometown. He couldn't physically stand up for the performance, so they built him this massive black throne center stage.
And the lineup for that show, talk about closing the circle.
It was perfect. He had the original Black Sabbath guys there. Geezer Butler, Bill Ward, Tony Iommi.
Amazing.
And he had his solo family, too. Zakk Wylde, Tommy Clufetos, Adam Wakeman. He just played through the pain. He sat on that throne and belted it out one last time for the fans.
And barely 2 weeks later, he was gone.
July 22nd, 2025. He died at his home in Buckinghamshire, surrounded by his family.
And the official cause?
Acute myocardial infarction, a heart attack, and cardiac arrest, which was complicated by the Parkinson's and coronary artery disease.
There is one detail in the aftermath that really stuck with me from our notes. It's a text message that Zakk Wylde received.
Yeah, this is so touching. After that final show at Villa Park, the backstage area was just absolute chaos. There were people everywhere.
Yeah.
Zakk didn't want to bother Ozzy in the middle of all that, so he didn't go back to see him. But a few days later, he gets a text from Ozzy. It just said, "I didn't see you. Thanks for everything."
Thanks for everything. From the guy who literally gave Zakk his entire career.
It really shows the humility he retained, despite all the ego and the madness of the rock star life. He knew exactly who helped him get there.
So when we zoom out today, 7 months after his death, what is the legacy here? Is it the music? Is it the TV show? Or is it just the fact that he survived as long as he did?
I think the legacy is that duality we talked about at the start. He was the hesitant, brummy kid who just wanted to be a rock star like the Beatles, but he somehow became the scariest frontman in the world.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I think his legacy is survival. He proved that you can fail, you can get fired from your own band, you can hit rock bottom in a hotel room.
You can lose your best friend in a plane crash.
Exactly. And you can still come back.
He was always competing with his past, wasn't he? Always worried Sabbath was going to be better than him.
He was. But if you look at the numbers and the cultural impact, his solo career arguably outlasted and outsold his early work.
Which leaves us with a really fascinating question to think about. Does the Prince of Darkness persona, the bat-biting, the reality TV antics, does all of that overshadow the actual musical genius of the albums he created with Rhodes, Lee, and Wylde?
It's a great question. Because he wasn't just a character. He knew exactly who to hire to get the sounds he heard in his head.
And that is a great place to leave it for today. If you haven't listened to Blizzard of Oz or No More Tears since the news broke last year, go do it today. Listen to those albums with fresh ears.
Yeah, listen to Mr. Crowley and think about Randy Rhoads.
Listen to No More Tears and think about that bond with Zakk Wylde.
And just appreciate that we had him for as long as we did.
Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.